Welcome to another episode of College to Career. Some of you have joined many of our fireside chats. This series we started a couple of weeks back because as kids are going through school, they need to make some very important decisions about like career, professions, areas to choose, subjects to take, so on and so forth. And if they get exposure to real professionals who've been through this journey, how they navigated high school, how they navigated college, how they navigated career, it would be very beneficial for them. And then this is something that parents have told, you guys have told us. So that's why we started this series. So hopefully this would be helpful to them. We hope, as parents have joined in, some of you also have your kids with you who are listening in. We definitely share recordings of these after the session is done. So today, our special guest is Larry. Larry has an amazing set of stories to tell us on how he himself has navigated. Well, Larry, welcome to Future Forward College to Career.
Thanks for having me, and I'm delighted to pay it forward, no pun intended. But I've been in the industry for quite a long time. And however I can help, I'm happy to.
Super. So why don't we actually get started? Tidbits about you, the audience knows. Oh, Larry, had MIT and CMU and chose CMU or MIT, but there is so much more. Why don't you start telling your story? What should the audience know about you?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Let me start with just a quick background of who I am and why I think I'm qualified to be here, and then we can dive in. So I'm originally from the East Coast of the United States. I'm from Connecticut. I went to school in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon for computer science, specifically in the School of Computer Science. I turned down MIT when I got into Carnegie Mellon, so we can go through that story. I almost got a 5-year BS, MS, MBA, but I chose to go straight out of undergrad to the West Coast, to Microsoft. Had several job offers, and I've been in Seattle ever since. So I joined out of undergrad, and I've been here 20 years now. I came to Microsoft to work on Microsoft Office. I spent about 8 years working on that. I got mad because I thought things moved too slowly, and I was about to leave when I met the guy that invented Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Project. He convinced me to stay. I buddied up with him. I was his chief of staff for a little while, and then he and I co-founded Microsoft Teams. So I was on Teams from day zero. When I left Microsoft, I was director of PM for Teams Consumer, Skype, and GroupMe, except my job had essentially become how to help things move less slowly. That doesn't work for me. I'm a high pace kind of guy. So I left, I joined DoorDash corporate, where I owned our merchant product. So for every merchant that you order from, what is their experience? How do we get more merchants on the platform? I was responsible for integrating McDonald's in a bunch of different ways. And just recently, I'm toying with semi-retirement. I've done well. I want to spend time with my kids. My kids are 5 and 7, so they're still young. I'll probably get back into things soon enough. But that's me in a nutshell. And I still spend a ton of time playing around, learning, figuring out the state of the art. And I think some of those traits that I've had from before college, through college, and afterwards just continue with me and set me up for success. That's why I'd love to share more of that.
That's amazing. It's quite a journey you've had, Larry. So let's begin, shall we? Let's actually begin with taking the biggest question that most of the folks today are here for. Everybody's reading this. I saw on another popular media outlet 2 days back, they published around computer science, like with AI tools getting, better at coding, is majoring in computer science still a smart move for students currently in high school and looking at applying to colleges in, 1 year or 3 years or 4 years? So you've been there, you've done that. Tell us about it. What's your worldview about it?
Yeah, look, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can't think of anything that I would rather study right now, knowing everything that I know. And I think it continues to set up folks very well. Computer science to me is not about how do I make some programming language work. It never has been. It's about both what is the state of the art in technology, how can you use technology to solve problems, and that will not go away. And it's about problem solving, tenacity, learning how to learn. And I'll come back to this at a few points throughout, but I actually think it has given me a tremendous amount of systems thinking. What is systems thinking? It's how to break problems down into manageable chunks. I'm willing to bet most folks on the call have used ChatGPT or Perplexity, a couple different models and so on. Even getting started with that, my approach was different from my wife's, who is not a technical person by trade and comes from the business side of the world. But how I approach problems changed fundamentally when I went to Carnegie Mellon. And that has not different from how computer science works today. They almost didn't care what programming languages we used as long as we knew how to solve problems and break them down into the right parts, ask the right questions, and translate them into the right opportunities. So a small percentage is teaching you exactly how to use the tech of today. It's more about learning how to think for tomorrow. And I still think computer science, among a few majors similar to that, sets you up really well for that.
Yeah. And would it be a stretch to say that, see, most of the great schools that most of the parents here and the kids aspire to, they are nimble themselves. They evolve their pedagogy, they evolve what they teach to students almost on a semester basis, if not a year basis. Like, I mean, the research is going on continuously in them. Did you see examples of that at your time 4 years in CMU?
In terms of how people evolved and
yes, how CMU evolving something based on what is going on in the industry?
100%. And actually, it's been there's never a better time to actually get in and go to an institution, I think, to be at the forefront of that technology. I went to CMU just before the internet tidal wave really exploded. Like, I think I started in 2001. The internet was definitely a thing, but it had not exploded into the services world. JavaScript was still basic. Internet Explorer was still dominant, right? Google hadn't really crashed onto the scene. And I know folks who sent their kids, and I know people who attended Carnegie Mellon just 4 or 5 years later from that. And the fundamentals were still the same. But the amount of exponential learning and applicability of taking the technologies and then being at the forefront to then capitalize on that tidal wave was astronomical. And that happened in just a few years. And the reason it can at the top universities is because they have the leading professors that are literally creating the technology. So I follow Andrew Ng, Andrew NG. If you follow him, he teaches at Stanford. He's one of the pioneers of AI. You can take his Coursera course, but he is one of the ones who is creating the future, and he's doing it more from the academic side, although he started businesses now. Carnegie Mellon is no different. And I'll just, small story, if you've heard of the DARPA Grand Challenge, 24 years ago, DARPA, the defense agency in the United States, started a challenge to create a self-driving car, more for military purposes. And Carnegie Mellon was bar none the leader in that in a variety of different ways. So from robotics to AI to computer vision and so on, the best folks in the world were going to were in computer science at Carnegie Mellon there. And then a bunch of them left, and then they went and they started the other fields. So yeah. I think academia continues to evolve, especially at the top universities where there are talent, to take advantage of that forefront. And the research forms the basis of not the next 3 years, but years 3 through 30, frankly.
Yeah, very rightly said. So let's talk a little bit more about CMU, right? Like, what stood out for you about your, of course, you went there very intentionally. You had, said, I'm not going to MIT, I'm going to CMU for a reason. So did that pan out academically, socially, culturally? How did it go?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a few different facets to this. Let's see. I applied to 4 schools out of high school. I applied to Carnegie Mellon, Harvey Mudd, MIT, and my safety school was Rensselaer Polytechnic. I have an identical twin brother. He was close to the same, except he added Caltech instead of Carnegie Mellon. And that's because he thought he was slightly more interested in science. And I knew I wanted computer science, for better and worse, and we can come to that. But when I got in early to Carnegie Mellon, I withdrew from MIT. And what I knew back then, and I think it's probably similar now, although I can't promise, it's been a few years since I've been back. He spent the first 2 years at MIT doing broad-based science, bio, chem, physics, computer science, just the general intros to everything. And everybody at MIT has an outstanding foundation across all the various sciences. I didn't want that. I was not interested in studying chemistry and doing I did a lot of math in high school. We can talk about that if that's helpful. I did discrete math and matrix algebra, linear, graph theory, and so on as it relates to computer science in Carnegie Mellon, but I didn't just do calculus for calculus' sake. I had done all that in high school, and Carnegie Mellon afforded me the major focus to be able to do that. But there were also a few other differences, some of which I was aware of and some of which I became aware of when I went there. The School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon, at least when I went there, undergrad was, I think, about 500 kids, and the school was about 5,000 undergraduates all up, Carnegie Mellon was. So it was just a small portion. And part of what I learned, maybe the most important thing that I learned in college, was how to be a human. I spent a ton of time in high school just by myself, sitting in front of a computer screen, teaching things. My parents were, yeah, do more of that. That's great. And it's true, but most of the world are not the elite of the elite. And that's not to say Carnegie Mellon in these other fields are bad. It has some of the best artists and theater folks in the world. And it has humanities and sciences, and the sciences are good. It's a good science school. I don't think it's one of the top science schools. I made friends with the computer science folks, and I made friends with the football team, and I made friends with the swim team. And while I might have taken college level math in high school, I was probably remedial in what it meant to actually have friendships otherwise. And I wish I would have done certain things differently in my life for that. But Carnegie Mellon actually gave me a fantastic foundation for that I've spent the last 25 years cultivating, and I think improving that.
Super interesting. In fact, you've already shared, what kind of preparation you were doing. You were doing math because you love math. But tell us a little bit more about, because the audience, of course, would be very interested.
Sure.
And if you could also then talk about, what does it take to prepare for top tier CS programs?
Okay. Let's see. There's a few pieces in that. So direct me as it goes. When I was in high school, I took obviously AP Calc BC. It was AP Computer Science. AB was how they did it, but I think they changed it after that. Then I finished that, and I took 3D Calc, so multivariable calc, if you're familiar with it. And then I went to a local college to try to take some computer science courses because I was deeply interested in it. I essentially went as far as I could in the fields that I thought were both relevant to computer science and that I was interested in. And I was less interested in the math than I was the computer science. And they weren't the best programs, but essentially it demonstrated drive. I was interested in changing the world. I was interested in having an impact, influencing others, connecting with them, and leveraging technology to better, call it civilization. It sounds pithy. And I was, 16, 17, and so on. But that is one way that I differentiated myself, is it was authentic. I wasn't just doing it in order to try to get to a college. I had a passion around that. In retrospect, I wish I would have had a couple of other passions that weren't just that, and I think it would have helped me some. But I both followed my passion, and I did some of this, although I wish I would have done more. I'm happy to dive into it. I experimented a lot. I tried a bunch of different things to figure out what would work well, what didn't work well, what did I enjoy and what did I not enjoy. And that set me up to be able to both make decisions about going into college, but it also set me up to be able to converse with the admissions program, with the professors, and otherwise, with confidence and with self-awareness. My parents weren't making the decisions for me. I knew what I liked. I had some blind spots about not knowing what I didn't know, but I knew it was kind of out there. So I prepared by doing the most academically that I could, but then I tried finding practical ways where I was in the local basketball league. How can I make a website for that basketball league? That was my idea, not my parents' idea. And it didn't work, and then it worked, and we can go into that. But I think in terms of preparing for college, I did the needful. We attended these kinds of seminars. I had a tutor. We did the various basics, but I didn't go overboard in that, to my mind. I spent a ton of time doing what I loved, which was engaging with a bunch of these problems and trying to say, how can I play with things that my dad was quite technical, but he didn't know much about the internet. How could he? He's not at the forefront. And actually, I'm jealous of either your kids or you, if you're young right now, because you are literally at the forefront of the AI wave.
Yeah.
And you will know more than I do. Maybe you already do because you're AI native. I'm AI optimized, but you guys can be AI native. So there's a variety of different ways to say, okay, what am I going to do with that? How am I growing up ingrained with that? I did that for coding and a little bit of the internet. And that's where I think in terms of preparing, it was about mindset of not just trying to tick the boxes and how am I going to do this? It was about finding myself of what am I interested in? And then why is that, or should it be attractive to these colleges? And you flip it on its head with that confidence, then it changes, I think, the way you approach.
That's a very important point you bring up, Larry, and the audience who's here. If you've seen around what Future Forward is about, we say we specialize in STEM, and there is a reason, because even let's say the top 30 colleges out there, not all colleges are the same. What STEM colleges look for, in many cases, is very different from what the Ivy League looks for. Ivy Leagues came from the liberal arts background, right? What they look for, the well-roundedness, is very different, but versus when you're targeting to colleges that Larry spoke about, right? MIT, CMU, RPI, RV Mud, right? Very, 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 very different. So something to keep in mind as you and your students are thinking about college list, so on and so forth. It's a very, very, very important point. Okay, Larry.
Sorry, I see a question. Is it okay that I take it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Timish, it's a fantastic question about high unemployment rate for CS grads. Why is that, and so on. I don't think it is for sure getting harder to find a first job, but I think it has never been easier to create a first opportunity. So finding a first job with the big tech companies, just take it. Most big tech companies are not hiring junior folks because AI has taken some of that, and the investments are going into people that can create new opportunities. And I'm not convinced that a ton of the people who went into CS are actually outstanding and prepped with the mindset that I'm going to create things, and they haven't tried and failed at 15 things. If they have, most people want to hire them. So you ask if it's a supply and demand issue or a skills gap. I'll tell you, I think it's a little bit of both, but more a skills gap than a supply and demand issue, because I don't think that enough students come out with a practical mindset with the self-awareness to say, if I was on my own, how would I create something? A lot of times, I interviewed thousands of college grads, literal undergrads. They come out with their hands held saying, okay, well, I'm going to go through the checklist. Nobody wants that. They want people who will create. They want people who will change the world and say, I get it. There's a lot that I don't know, but here's what I do know. And when I went into interviews, just small aside, and I don't mean this as hubris, I think I went on 30 on-site at Carnegie Mellon interviews when I was interviewing. I had my pick of who I wanted to go on-site for, so fly to the headquarters. I picked 7. I got 7 offers. And it was different. And they told me it was different. When I went in, I had already thought, if I had this job, this is how I would do the job. These are the questions that I'd want to know. This is what I have to understand about the business. And not every student is either capable of that or does that in the first place. So the world is changing, and AI is taking the junior and the basic jobs. However, there's a ton of investment capital now flowing into startups and small companies. I don't know if you all saw it. I forget the name of the company now. It might have been Box 44, but I think it was an $80 million acquisition from one guy who didn't take any extra equity, and it was a 6-month-old company. The opportunity is there. The world is changing for sure, but the number of small companies that can exist, I think, is going up astronomically. If you just go and try to find a job the same way you did 8 years ago, frankly, the world has changed. And that was true when I was there, but a little bit less. So I don't have a crystal ball, but that's my take, is the more kids are prepped and understand systems thinking, not I'm a Python coder, tell me what you want me to build, but I understand technology and I know how to learn. Point me in some direction and I will come back in 2 months with success. and ask the right questions. That's the skill that's not there. You're welcome.
Yep. More and more, and Taneja, and the audience here, it is important for us to definitely, orient our kids about this new reality, that each of them needs to be a producer, a creator on their own right. Their brand, whether it is within a company, that the company is 20 people or 2,000 people, or just them alone starting their own companies, is what will matter. That's exactly where the world is going, right? So, very, 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 very important point. Larry, you went to college, studied CS. There are various ways to skin the CS cat, right? What do you think are some of the common myths and realities about studying CS in college?
Yeah, it's a great question. First one is that college is purely academic and it's not really useful in the real world. You go there just to get through the gate and then you enter the real world. That's a myth. Depending on your college, and if you're at a top tier school, the real world starts with the professors that you learn. It starts with the network of friends that you build, and I'll come to that for a minute. And profs want to work with students. It's cheap or free labor, and people who want to work with them, and they want to see the students succeed. Just as an example, my cousin went to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science before I did, when Bluetooth was being invented, and one of the people who was on the Bluetooth creation team, he was a professor there. So there was a special course. I've got my undergraduate course catalog down there, so I don't have this. His course catalog had Introduction to Bluetooth. What's Bluetooth? He took the course, and then he ended up making a career because he was one of the few in the industry that knew how to do that. That started in college. I had friends that did independent studies. They created a business. The college wants you to do this. You can learn a ton of things practically by not just following the pure academic path and actually getting exposure to things. So depending on what school you go to, if you go to a top tier school, your life, your exposure can start far in advance of actually getting your first job, where you then get trained and so on. So I think that's a myth. Couple other ones. You live your life in a computer lab and don't figure out how to be social. I don't remember where I saw this one, but that's also a myth. College is a place to learn, to be social, to figure out how to influence people, and spend time on a computer. So I did not, I think I mentioned this before, I was Spock, if you will. So if you're familiar with him, he doesn't really have feelings. It's not about emotions. It's pure logic. And every math professor and APC calc wants you to be that. The best students, the best candidates of people that I hired are very self-aware and in touch with their emotions and influential and able to read other people. You learn that in college. Like, you're surrounded by a whole bunch of kids. You can find other people. You can go sit and play Dungeons and Dragons, but you're still interacting with people. And the more you spread your network and make friends, my network right now, if I wanted to go get a job, some of the first people I'd call, I met in college. If you go look at Facebook, like just look at Zuckerberg and Andrew Bosworth, and I'm not going to mention some other names and so on, they were all at Harvard together and they were friends together. They knew that they were some of the best at technology X. So college is not about just going and getting to the courses. If you look at it as a piece to a whole of learning to live your life, that I think is what is transformative. And I did that before I went to CMU. I walked through CMU. I talked to lots of folks, and that's how I decided it. There's others, but I think those are the top two.
Yeah. No, that's again another very important nugget for kids, that 4 years of college, yes, it's about a major, yes, it's about a career and going deeper in a topic, but it is maybe that is 20 to 30% of it. There is so much more to it. The social aspect is so big because those are very, very transformative years for these students. They literally become adults in college. Right? So very, very important. Super. Larry, if you could go back in time, right, what would you do differently, or would you do anything differently about your college experience or your application process now that you have hindsight?
This one's easy. Yeah, there's one thing that I really wish I would have done differently, and I wish I would have tried a wider breadth of offerings that Carnegie Mellon had and technology that was out there. I sort of embarrassed to say I didn't take operating systems, which is one of the seminal classes there. I took networks instead, which is okay, but I didn't take operating systems because I didn't have to. I didn't take computer vision, and I didn't take AI. Why didn't I do that? The most fundamental reason is I was afraid to fail. It wasn't my MO. Like, I took all the math courses and I got solid B+, A- kind of things in there. I can think about that, but it's not my massive area of strength. And I knew that I wanted to go build apps for people. And that pigeonholed me away from what I think would have been transformative foundations. So this isn't about like, what job am I going to get and what specific technology am I going to use? Learning how to think about the concept of an operating system. If you're actually watching the state of the art right now, Andrej Karpathy just had he gave a talk to the Y Combinator new class where he equated LLMs, large language models, which is what powers ChatGPT and so on, to the new operating system. Just that comes with a bunch of conceptual foundations. And when you know how to think about it that way, and I've spent catch up doing that, you learn how to think about those concepts differently to build the next LLM and to use the next LLM. If you've heard of, I'm not going to throw around jargon, if you've heard of MCP and the way LLMs connect with other apps, that is the principle of IO, input, output, of filling an operating systems gap. And computer vision and AI and so on. I've taken neural networks classes now since then, but it was hard for me I pigeonholed myself so early instead of saying, let me just find it out and maybe I'll be bad at it, but that's okay. The biggest disservice my parents did to me is they didn't teach me how to fail. Like, it was not okay to fail. And I've spent both some therapy and a lot of years in work, not working harder to avoid failing. That is by far the biggest regret that I have in my life that held me back far more. If I hadn't, I would have left Microsoft at least 12 years earlier. And I think I would have I've had a ton of impact. Don't get me wrong, I've been quite lucky, but I think I would have done things a little differently had I been okay failing. And it would have started at Carnegie Mellon and how I would have taken courses differently and been okay with not doing well in them, but getting exposed to them.
Yeah. So, okay to fail. Important, especially for parents who are here with kids still in late middle school, early high school. That experimentation time they still have with them. Let them experiment. It's important. Yes, it is important to kind of formalize your, hey, this is where I'm going. Yes, it is. But that only comes through some experimentation, through some trying and failing. So, very, very critical. Larry, we'll take one or two questions that the audience has submitted to us as they signed up, and then we'll come back to you. I would actually combine 2 or 3 questions which are very similar. With this AI coming in, yes, we talked about CS being more around systems thinking. That is important. But are there other areas, subjects, professions that kids should start looking into as they prepare for college? I'll share my thoughts, but if you have any early thoughts, I don't know, information systems comes to mind, and that can be done in different ways. Like, what are your thoughts?
Sorry, you want me to go first, or do you want to take it first?
You go first.
Entrepreneurialism can come in many forms. So getting exposure not to specific computer science, but just pick a problem, any problem, right? Or learn how to pick a problem can be something. So I'm not going to put a specific label on it, but in terms of things to study, go find a problem for some human and solve it. Can I wash your windows for you, and will you pay me $28 for it? How would that work? What would happen if I wanted to do 10 of those? So I would say there's more a structure to the problems that you have that you can teach yourself. Ask anybody what the top 5 problems they have right now are. What makes your life harder? What app do you hate? What do you wish would work differently? I use this as an interview question. Tell me about an app that you love and an app that you hate. And then I ask somebody, how would you solve it? The worst candidates have never thought about it before. Oh, that's an interesting question. The best candidates say, oh, thank God you asked. These are the 5 things I would do differently. This is what I want to learn. This is how it's going to go. So that's not, do I want to study computer science or not? That's just find 5 things that you think are designed poorly, that don't work right. A problem that's not solved in your life, in your parents' life, something along those lines. Do that. And then say, hey, would you pay me to solve this for you? Have the business conversation. How much would you pay? right? There's a ton of things you can learn. So if you figure out what would it be like if I ran a business that solved this problem, you go through the whole gamut, and you can watch YouTube videos far better than I can. But how do we start a business? Like, do the searches of just how do I pick something to focus on? And I'm willing to bet right now this isn't for at least 98% of you. It's an academic question of what do I want my kid to focus on? Go do the search. Ask an LLM, ask 5 LLMs, all different ones, and ask YouTube, how do I figure out what the options are? Teach yourself how to answer that question, and then have them go do the same thing and prepare your notes. And then what did you learn by using the various tools to do it? So my answer isn't around a specific area. It's about a specific set of skills that range from problem identification to problem solving to execution to business influence and customer interaction. And you can do all of those things. And any job that you're going to have is going to need every one of those specific skills.
Yeah. And again, every kid is different. So, there's one methodology of approaching it that, Larry just talked about. Some kids will be like, I don't even know. Maybe I only know what my parents do and, what we interact in their friend circle or my friend circle. That's where I think exposure matters. Exposure matters a lot. So more they know about different professions, more they know what value do they add. And this is at some point in their mind, they will be like, that seems boring. They're like, ooh, that seems very interesting, right? That's what we want, especially kids early in school, early in high school or late in middle school. That's what we definitely want for them. But as they are going deeper into things, they should explore more. And that's whether they're talking to professors or professionals, I would say, or going through guides, going through YouTube videos. As Larry said, I know my son, this was almost 5 years back, used to look at thermodynamics YouTube videos. It's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you into this? Like, oh, because I am following Formula One. And then Formula One aerodynamics matters, but thermodynamics also matters because of the engine. And just because of an interest, he was deep into it. And today, he's doing mechanical engineering at Georgia Tech, along with CS. He's found his way. But that's how kids find their way, right? They have to dabble into things, their interest, and then find allied places. So that would be important for them. Okay. There are some other questions which are very specific, like, hey,
sorry, before you move on, there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to take it now.
Yeah, Taneja, we will come to the robotics question just after this. There are certain questions that were submitted which are very specific to what we do in Future Forward in terms of college admission advising, whether, hey, IB program pathways, or how do I choose college list and all that. Please ping us. Happy to have a chat about how do we do that, because that is not as much of a subject for today's discussion, but it is important, and that's what we do day in and day out. So please ping us, and then happy to walk you through that. Okay, let us take Timus's question about robotics. Larry, you want to take that?
Yeah, but I think I'll be able to give a better answer if I can contrast it. Can you answer the last question about the general how to stand out in college applications? And then I'm happy to talk about robotics and so on.
Yes. So, Timish, I think there are 2-3 aspects to it, especially when it comes to robotics. And again, robotics is becoming hot again. I don't think it became completely cold, but because of AI and robotics and autonomous cars and what have you, it's becoming hot again. At the same time, the activities that we see that kids do, whether they do VEX robotics, FIRST, all of these teams, important. But at the same time, from a college perspective, it is also important to understand what did your kid do. Most of the robotics teams win something as a team of 4, team of 5, team of 6. Everyone will write the same thing, right? When it comes to college admissions, how do kids then differentiate themselves? That is where their areas of interest will be important. So in robotics, in my robotics team, this is the value I added. Here is why. Here is the area I went deep into. So that would be my real quick answer about how do kids differentiate themselves even if they are doing robotics.
I'll play a +1 on that and add a couple bits. Keep in mind, I haven't applied to college in 25 years, so I defer to Future Forward and Vineet for the specifics. There's 2 things. One, in the question, I'll just note there's growing interest for kids to pursue robotics in school. I would encourage everybody on this call, if you feel like you're in that scenario, why? Does the kid want to pursue it, or do you want them to pursue it? And there's a big, big, big difference there, that if you want them to pursue it and they're not all that interested in it, you already have a problem, and the authenticity of everything about the application and the kid's work is probably going to suffer. And if the kid is interested in it, then the why they're interested in it is critical. Are they interested because it's a great business opportunity? Are they interested because they think it's cool and it's bleeding edge technology? Are they interested because somebody challenged them to do it? Why? What's the why? There's a great Simon Sinek talk. Some of you may have seen, Start With Why. It's 15 years old now, but it still holds. So I do think that's critical. The why makes a big difference, because that should change how you're going to stand out. Separately, assuming you have the why and assuming you have the authenticity, I'll just give you one thing that comes to mind when you say how to stand out. Don't give the same answer as everybody else. So everything Vineet said is absolutely right. What is your kid's role and so on? But the answer that I would immediately want to start with is, I'm going to assume that all of the robotics kids are going to say, this is why I'm great at robotics and this is why it's going to hear. I want to start with an essay or something along those lines that says something to the extent of, I tried the hardest robotics problem I could do and I failed. And it was hard. And it taught me this lesson and this lesson and this lesson. Let me start at the beginning. My goal was not to create the car that was going to drive down the stairs and annoy my sister. My goal was to solve this massive real world problem that would potentially do the future of this and teach myself this, and that. I did learn a ton of things along the way, but I failed. And I had to deal with that failure. And that taught me this about life. That is a well-rounded and deep answer, which is very, very different from, I worked on this project, I built this car, it went to the end, and I taught myself how to write assembly code to convert the doohickey into the schmoohickey.
Super. Okay, hopefully that's helpful, Timish, and helpful to other parents as well. Thanks for asking that question and series of questions. Okay, let's do a little bit turn. So Larry, you did your CS, went to CMU, and then something happened along the way in Microsoft, and you turned to the dark side, you became a PM. How did that happen? And like, what is this PM role? Let's start with that. If
yeah.
Kids
well, I'm gonna start with what happened, and I think that'll give me a good definition. When I graduated, I told people I wanted something that was like 60% coding and building and 40% strategy and businessy. And the role literally didn't exist. I could either get an offer as a software developer or I could go business-wise. PM at Microsoft was literally the only role where I felt like I could do both. And it was called a program manager back then, not a product manager. Yeah. But that's what appealed to me. That's why I turned down every other one, is I wanted the mix of that. And I talked about a BS, MS, MBA. I was always interested in creating not just the bits and bytes, but also the business opportunity. And that's how I originally got into PM. Now, over time, PM has evolved. Google made PM, Meta made PM, more of what it is today than at Microsoft. And I would say most PMs at Microsoft are not the archetypal Silicon Valley PMs that are creating things. We could talk about that at some point. But let me step back up for a minute. Essentially, a software engineer says, how am I going to create this? A PM says, what should I create and why is it important to create now? And then there's some gray in between where they work together, but that's in a nutshell. What should I create and why should I create it? Why should I invest hundreds of millions of dollars to do this? And then when things go wrong, how do we make a decision? The engineer comes back and says, I can't do it the way you want. If I do it the way you want, it's going to be really slow. Is it okay to be slow or not? The PM answers that question because they understand the customer in and out. They understand the opportunity and they understand both the market and who is going to use the product. There's two-ish different types of products. There's business products and there's consumer products. I've worked on both. You build and prioritize features differently. With Microsoft Teams, which I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with, we spent a ton of time prioritizing enterprise-like features, like how do I ensure compliance? How do I build security? How do I know what my employees are doing? How do I make sure when somebody starts on day zero, they have a good experience? If you have a consumer app, there's no IT administrator. You just download the thing and go. So the funnel is substantially more important. Where are my customers coming from? Where am I losing them? Is the sign-up experience terrible? How do I outreach to them? How do I convert them into being a paying customer? So you don't do that when you're designing for the business. So I became a PM because I cared a lot about figuring out what customer problems to solve and building them. And I think PM has just evolved from there and taken off because somebody has to make the decision.
Yeah. And many people also ask, as AI is coming in, will the PM job be relevant, not relevant? I think it will be relevant because PM is one role that sits at the intersection of multiple disciplines, right? You have to understand the customer and the market really, really, really well, and make it simple for the team so that the engineers can do their job, whether they're using AI to code, doing it themselves, whether there are 10 of them or 100 of them. Hence, will it evolve? Absolutely, it will evolve. But that need will always be there. I mean, we've seen in Microsoft and other places in Silicon Valley that there's a melding between product managers who were sitting in marketing to PMs who were sitting with engineering. Today, most of the Valley calls the product manager role is close to, it's still part of R&D, right? But it can speak GTM almost the same clip that it can speak R&D.
There's a reason why a lot of CEOs, not all, but a lot of CEOs come from product instead of engineering.
Yeah. And Satya is a classic example himself at Microsoft. Even Zuck and Bilji both, they built it, but they understood the market. So they were PMs and engineers as they were building their own first products and the company. Can someone become a PM right out of college, Larry?
Well, I did, and I think the answer is yes nowadays, but probably differently. We at DoorDash didn't generally hire super junior folks. Maybe we'd take a rotational candidate, and there are a few rotational candidates, but even those are drying up. Microsoft for the longest time just hired its PMs straight out of college and then trained them. And I even think that is drying up, although less so, but still some. But here's the key thing that I'll tell you. I think it depends on what size company you're looking at. At the giant tech companies and the mid-sized tech companies, not so much. But you can find opportunities at companies that are either smaller or don't have quite a lot of tech presence or expertise. They desperately need people that they don't have to train, that they can just say, I got problems, I want to level up, what should I do? And like I was talking about before, the students that graduate that know how to speak the what and the why, this is what you should be interested in, this is the why, and they can just come up to speed on any business. And I can do that today, I think, because of how I was trained in college and how I prepared for college. Point me at a subject that I know nothing about, and I'll come back in a week, and I won't be the world's expert at it, but I'll be pretty darn good. Call it in the 80th percentile. And that's not hubris. That's just, I know how to learn. And then I can apply it into everything else. The students who do that can get employed. They might not get employed. They won't get employed at the, I'm just going to be a first year super junior, let me learn the ropes for a year kind of thing, PM. But you can be a PM or a founder or any one of those kinds of things at companies that desperately need to be able to leverage the technology. And I would actually argue the amount of leverage a single junior person who has grown up AI native, like students of today, can provide to those companies that have not is astronomical compared to what a PM could have done for Microsoft 20 years ago coming out of college.
Yeah.
But you have to know how to do it, speak it, and leverage it to be able to find and make the opportunities.
Totally. And the two questions very, very related, Kritika's question and Jibrani's question. So let me also answer this online. One, literally, there is no one in a good university will prevent a kid from doing, if they're doing a major in computer science, to do a minor in any subject. Arts, humanities, social sciences, business, anything. Like literally anything. So that's number one. So now, are there some more popular ones? It depends on the kids, right? Yeah, some of the engineering ones are popular because as kids are looking at what is happening out there in autonomous and robotics, electrical, mechanical engineering are important along with CS. Many kids are doing that. I've seen many kids doing a major in business and a minor in computer science. right? You can also flip it over. It really depends on where the kid's heart and skills lie. As Larry was mentioned, it is important for them to, as they within college, as well as when they come out of college, be able to sell themselves, whether it's to their employer, to the investor, if they're starting up on their own, and that will come from something after they've been deep into, to say, you know what, I am a great salesperson. I can sell anything and understand business, but I do want to take a minor in something because AI is big enough, but I want to know the bowels of it. Let me take a minor in computer science. That could be one thought process for a kid, versus some kid is like, I am amazing in CS. There's definitely a major that I am going to do, but I do want to supplant it with one or two minors, depending on what their what their choices are. This is where, as they do the research about the colleges that they want to actually apply to, it's important that they really dig in and understand. For example, many of the colleges have starting doing interdisciplinary majors themselves, right? So you don't have to cook it up yourself. They might actually give to you as programs that are also pre-created. It's part of your college selection, it's part of your college list. All right, the question is, how can we prepare for AI jobs? What specific new skills are needed? Ranjit, first tell me, what do you mean by AI jobs?
He answered that, or I prompted it right under that.
Okay. So Larry, you want to take that then?
Yeah, I'm happy to dive in. The first thing that I'll say is the same thing that I think computer science and a couple of other majors teach you, which is problem solving, learning how to learn, systems thinking. I encourage you to do a search on that, but how do you break problems down into their constituent parts? There is absolutely a fundamental aspect to computer science and theory and math that you need if you're going to create the next models. If you're going to go to NVIDIA and work on the 1 nanometer GPU, you got to know electrical engineering, right? That's an AI job, and that's not different. If you're going to go figure out how to train models, right, you at least need to understand, how do I break it down? So I'm going to create 8 models that then combine together into a composite that actually answers the question. And what is the system doing under the covers? You use ChatGPT, 4.0, right now, but under the covers, a reasoning model is different from just a basic answering model. And if you actually break it apart, there's a bunch of wonderful YouTube videos on that. You need to understand how to break the problem down into those constituent parts beyond just coding the solution for it. But I actually think most jobs are not the ones that will create the new AI metal. It will be taking AI and making every other industry better. So if all you did was say paralegal for personal injury, if all you did was say, I'm going to make secretaries in this domain better, if all you did was say, I'm going to apply AI to an electrician's work and say, how can I do that? What skills do I need? Go become amazing at a bunch of the state-of-the-art tools today and say, how can I use these tools to solve this person's problem? It goes back to just pick anything and it can benefit from AI, as long as you are familiar with the tools and concepts. And once you become familiar with the tools and concepts, you can then ask yourself the question of, I wish I understood how this part worked better. That tells you the skills. So yeah. Vineet, maybe that's too abstract. I can go deeper. But
no, but you touched it. Let me land it with another example. A student of Future Forward, high school, was trying to land an internship, and they talked to this company. And the company's like, okay, we are talking about, so what AI tools do you use? Because ChatGPT, I use Perplexity, I use this, I use that. And for coding, we use Cursor. They sprung a different coding tool, AI coding tool in front of him. Within 10 minutes, the kid and the person, they actually created a web page, right? Beautiful looking web page. Using this new tool that the kid had never used before, but he knew how to use them because he had used about 10 or 20 of them. That is important. So how can we prepare for AI jobs? By just playing with these, as Larry is saying, they need to be AI native, right? They should be playing with as many AI tools. Most of them are free out there, or at least a tier of that is free. So they are interested in it, and depending on what their area of interests are, they should just get familiar with it. Coding is one, design is different, art is different. The tools are just proliferating. So even if they are not going deeper into CS, where the systems part will start coming in, they need to get familiar with these tools, because most of the jobs, and a lot of them are already becoming, will be working with these tools. So, becoming so used to with them is going to be critical for them. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I'll just give you one more real example. My wife was mad because we didn't have iPad chargers and headphones, and the kids' stuff is everywhere, and there's cords everywhere in the kitchen. I don't know computer automated design, but I got a 3D printer, and using ChatGPT and YouTube, I taught myself how to go through and do it. And there's a bunch of different parts of stuff here that I'm making for how to do this. But the key thing was not how do I do it? It was knowing that I needed to print a prototype of this specific piece, because this is one of the places that it could fail. So anybody can take a YouTube video and follow a rote set of steps. System thinking helped me break down and say, I need to prototype it this way. I need to test out this piece. Oh crap, it might fail here. Let me learn more about this. That is a skill that is not like, let me go learn math. It's problem solving at its finest. And you can learn problem solving from math. You can learn it from computer vision. You can learn it from social studies, frankly. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but that's just a practical application that most people would just say, okay, I'm going to make this big giant thing and print it. It doesn't work. Now what?
Yep.
And I have systems thinking, and I didn't do it that way, and it's worked out okay.
Super example. Shweta, if a child is not interested in CS but likes math, I would say not only data science, statistics, which again, both of them are also amazing, but don't think just from a degree perspective. If they are interested in data science, let them explore, and they should go for data science. If they're interested in statistics, maybe going really deep in statistics is where they want to make their career. But they could just study math in college for 4 years. You know what? Most of the AI, 90% is math, right? And mathematicians are going to be in even more high demand right now. I don't know if you're following the news. Facebook is spending between $10 to $100 million per person in giving out offers to people who, when they were doing undergrad and all that, were mostly math geeks, right? CS and math geeks are math geeks in a big way. That if a kid is interested in math, you should encourage them as much as possible. If they get to a PhD level and all that, they will be in very high demand, and they have a very, very good life ahead of them. Okay, we have only 6 minutes left. Last question for Larry. Based on, again, you're not a professor, you're not doing the pedagogy for CMU, but you've seen this, I'm sure, from outside. How do you think, Larry, the CS curriculum has evolved over the past decade, right? And what skills should high school students be building now beyond just coding?
Specifically at Carnegie Mellon or generally?
Generally, CS.
There's a clear shift towards going much deeper in what would have just been one course in AI, now is like 40 courses in AI. Everything from prompt engineering to neural nets to a bunch of things that I'm not even familiar with. So I would say, in so much as it started out where operating systems is the thing, and maybe you build a few apps on top, to then applications and internet and services development became the thing. That was then the double click, and that became the whole curriculum. Like, I can go find the curriculum book back here. There's whole curriculums now about AI and where it's going, and it continues to evolve. And that is now, robotics was a thing at Carnegie Mellon. It's becoming a thing at more universities now, because that is also AI is making it substantially easier to make broader robotics applications, and that's where things start to really explode. So it's very clear from a computer science curriculum to me that the depth of study and the bleeding edge is expanding there, whereas it's probably, I wouldn't say shrinking, but I would say it's much more foundational and less popular to look at what had been the traditional computer science-y type topics.
Yeah.
And what would I do if I was a student and I wanted to prepare myself for that? I would make myself as expert as possible to how to use the tools and understand what goes on in them. So I would flip it back and say, which people do they follow on X or Twitter? Which YouTube channels do they watch regularly? There's a YouTube channel called How I AI. It's also a podcast. It was a spinoff from Letty Rachinsky's PM podcast. Do they watch that? Are they interested in it? Do they know what people are doing day in, day out? And then do they try it themselves? Do that as one bit. And the second bit is just ask somebody, what problems do you have? And try to figure out how what they're learning can apply to that. That's what I would do, aside from what I think are the core foundations of do well in school, do the right structure. You're far more expert at that than me. But the differentiators are going to be, are they actually, no high school professor is going to teach them, like, these are the best ways to AI. They're going to be the people that are living it. How are they living it, and how are they applying it and finding new opportunities? They're probably the best situated to do it.
Exactly. And that, in fact, that's how when we work with families who work with Future Forward, is we try to bring out the interest that the kid has, the strengths that they have, instead of giving a cookie cutter, here is the template, put yourself, because you know what, you put cookie cutter, every highly selective colleges has seen the cookie cutter and it does not work. So if it is not coming genuinely from the kid, and there is a way to do that, that's what we work with the families on in Future Forward. Ranjit, you have your hands up. Go for it. Ranjit, you may be on mute and speaking.
Oh yeah, my last question is just quickly, like we live in Seattle, like we have a competitive market. So should we, like we want to go to UW Seattle, but it's hard to get in. So I think we want to do this computer science, AI focused. Do we have to focus on the university or the skills? If we go far away, different university is not highly capable as UW.
I would say, again, universities matter. As Larry said, because of the congregation of students as well as professors and other staff, there is a reason why big and good colleges are big and good colleges, right? And of course, when you join them, it's really important for you and your student to target the good ones. But is UW the only one in this area and state of Washington? Not the only one, but yes, the best program for CS is Paul Allen. CS, which is very hard to get into because it's becoming extremely competitive. But you go to the other state, out of state seats are there for UC Berkeley, UCLA, and other UC schools are there. You can go to USC, a great computer science program, UT Austin, great computer science program, or if you want to go towards East Coast. So there are many colleges with great CS programs. Harvey Mudd, again in California, that Larry mentioned. So there's not a dearth of colleges to target if CS is the area of interest and in depth that the student is creating.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we are towards the end of the program. Thank you all for joining. Again, amazing discussion. Larry, thanks for joining us. This discussion will hopefully live longer on our blog and other places as well. And for those of you who are here, you know where to find us, whether it's admission strategy advising or college essays. If your student is already in the senior year, please do ping us at these coordinates.